All right, and we are live. Go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Terry, and also Debbie, Ashley, Laura, Sarah, Kate, anyone else I'm missing. I'm Joel Freeman, and I am here today for the next hour or so to talk about my journey as a white man from Canada into Black history. And so I'm wide open for any questions that you may have during the time that we're on together. And so one thing I notice is that whenever I speak on this topic, there's these little cartoon bubbles that come above people's heads, and they're just saying, "What the heck is this white guy from Canada doing talking about Black history?" And I really don't have a very good response to that question, other than it is a compelling question. And there, see, I was raised in a in Alberta, Canada. We had about 2,000 people, no television, lived 9 miles from a movie theater, and from late October until early April, I was out skating minimum 2 hours every day. And you can see on the screen here, that's me way over to the right. And I was just really on the ice 2, 3, 4 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was quite an experience. And so what happened with me is that I left home when I was 17. I hitchhiked all around North America. And you can see, I'll show you an image of me in just a second here. This is me back in 1972. And but today, when we talk about these particular topics, this topic, I have some philosophical cores that I am a person that is a seeker, a learner. I live the curiosity-driven life. And like Augustine said back in the fourth century, he said, seek to understand before seeking to be understood. And that doesn't preclude the need to be understood. It just simply says, this is a great way to live one's life, is to lead with the seeking to understand some more. And what I often say to parents and anyone that's working together on a team for any particular purpose in a family system, in a corporate setting, in a faith-based setting, whatever it might be, community-based organization, is if everyone would seek to understand for the next 30 days, seek to understand before seeking to be understood, it would just transform things. And developmental psychologists tell us that it takes about 28 to 30 days to change a habit. And so if someone does it for 30 days, it really can change the way we approach crises in our lives, ups and downs and all arounds, as to seek to understand. Because most of what we deal with in our crises has to do with people in our lives in some level. Also, risk and reward. One of the things in economics, in investing, is the higher the risk, the greater the reward. The lower the risk, the smaller the reward. And I've always lived my life as a high risk person in that regard. And I do have low risk things that I'm involved in and try to balance things out. But I really enjoy traveling. I've been to over 55 countries. I've worked with all kinds of people in different stratas. And I found that, especially with cross-cultural aspects, for me, is to just risk with people. Just say, this might be probably is a stupid question. But I got some crazy questions ricocheting around this little pea brain of mine, and I'd like to ask you X, Y, and Z, and let's discuss this. Let's build a friendship that's based on trust, and by risking, I think we can develop that trust together. And then also, I developed a website called truthcentrism.com. And what I tried to do is to show an even-handed approach to both Eurocentrism and Afrocentrism and introduce the whole concept of truth centrism. If you notice my face and your face, there's two ears, one mouth. There's a parable there somewhere. I've learned a heck of a lot more by listening than I have by speaking. And so The things that I share today have come from a lot of listening with people. And then when we have a time for questions a little bit later, I don't even call it Q&A. I call it Q&R because I will respond. And I'll respond just a gut level, let you know exactly what I'm thinking. So I call it Q&R. And because I don't have many answers to many. In fact, I can barely fill a thimble full of what we're going to talk about today. And so I report instead of trying to explain. I can't explain very much. And just putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And as you can see here, that there are many pieces that are still away from each other. And we have colonialism, we have historic issues, social injustice issues, slavery, racism, discrimination, prejudice, affirmative action, all these different aspects. But I'm hoping that today that we can move the pieces of the puzzle just a little bit closer together as a result of our time together during this Zoom event. As I mentioned, this is me back in 1972. I left home, as I mentioned, at 17 years of age. I started hitchhiking all around North America. I probably put about 5,000 or 6,000 miles in this thumb. I don't highly recommend it. It's not very safe. Back then, it was a blast. And I was a long-haired hippie, dope smoking fool, and just going from place to place. If I get bored with some place in California, I'd move on. I'd go up to Montana, or I'd go over to Oregon, or something like that. It was just the way I lived my life for close to 2 years. The only regret I have of that particular time in my life is the pain I brought to my parents. My mother's hair turned white during that period while I was gone. And so I can only imagine what kind of worry she had, because this is pre-digital, no cell phones, there's no way to keep in touch other than me calling them because they didn't know where I was. And so, it was just a very, just a different kind of time. And so what happened is, to take a look at that young man right there, and I was 18 years of age, and 7 years later, I became mentor chaplain for the Washington Bullets, the Wizards in the NBA. So you can imagine what kind of juvenile thinking, juvenile behavior I had to deal with in my own personal life. And it's just something that I really had to kind of confront these issues. And so I had no mentor. It's a whole nother story how that happened, how I became a mentor, chaplain, character coach, whatever you want to call it. But I was one of the first ones in the history of the NBA. And that was back when Wes Unseld was still a player. For those of you who know NBA history, he just passed away last year, and he was an icon in the NBA, one of the top 50 of the entire NBA in the history, in terms of performance and just how he dealt with the game. And later on, he became general manager, and then coach, and then back to general manager. He was really an icon with the team. So what happened is, you can pretty much mention any player in that 1978 to 1998 time period. I had some type of interaction, whether it was Michael Jordan or Chris Webber or Julius Erving or whoever it might be. And so what happened with me is that their position in life attracts a lot of insincere people. So they're looking at me. I mean, I was 25 when this happened. And so 15, I looked 15, 16 years of age. They're looking at me like, I'm supposed to spill my guts to that guy? You got to be kidding me. And it was a kind of an interesting time where, well, what happened is that they began to ask me questions. And the questions began to cause me to start studying. And then the study then caused me to start looking at things through a different lens, and more interaction, more discussions, and long conversations about all kinds of things around race relations, African American history, ancient African history, Egyptian, all kinds of things that were really fascinating to me. And so that really helped. The reason I'm telling you this is because that really helped to bring me to a place of understanding in a deeper way, in a broader way, around the area of Black history. As I mentioned, I live a curiosity-driven life, and curiosity kind of cuts two ways. There can be what's known as momentary curiosity, where you're walking down the street and there's someone that's got a blue mohawk and they're tatted all around their eyes and their face and everything. For a moment, you're going, whoa, I'd like to get to know that person. And then, but then move on with life. I'm talking about 24/7 curiosity, because a lot of people, especially in corporate America, they might have curiosity about cross-cultural relationships and understanding for maybe 9 to 5. And I'm talking about 5:01 all the way around the clock to 8:59 the next day, to have a 24/7 approach. And I think while something like this can be mandated to a certain way in an educational institution or a corporate setting or faith-based, whatever it might be, I don't think it really hits until someone starts it from inside and says, I am going to reach out in this way myself. So anyway, this was a valuable, important time in my life. And it just helped me to become more aware about different things. And so here you have a shoe, and this is, I'm going to show you right here. This is the actual Shaq shoe. This is size, what do you think? What do you think? Size 22? Size 22. And if we were present, I'd let some of you sniff it if you wanted to. And you can see all kinds of, this is 16 inches long, weighs 2 pounds. And the reason I bring this is because, first of all, very few people have ever seen a shoe this size. And I'll take off my shoe. I wear size 10. And so just to give you an idea of the difference of the size of the shoe, it just dwarfs it. So what happened is that the shoe, I bring this because, first of all, it's seeing the size of it. Then it's also asked the question, what's life like in these shoes? What are the upside of being in these shoes? What's the downside of being in these shoes? And so it's a real challenge. The get rich quick schemes. The latest statistics I heard is that if a young guy, let's say at 22, 23 years of age, is making $1 million, once you carve out all of the agent fees, the player association fees, everything comes down to that person is making $440,000, which you might say that's a heck of a lot of money. But it really isn't when you have to live large and you have people coming at you saying, hey, can you spot me for 50,000, or I got this idea for business. It's just, for a young kid, it's just a lot of pressure. And so life in these shoes is very challenging. I told these guys many times, I don't envy you at all. It may seem kind of sexy and cool and everything else to be that tall and have that much money and do this and do that. But it's a lot of challenges that come with it. You can go away for a 17-day road trip and come home, and your wife says, "Hey, would you change the diapers? You take the trash out?" And it's a big challenge living a life like that. Another reason I bring this is I want to ask this question: what's life like in your shoes? What are the ups and the downs? And we're going to visit some of this, the ups and downs of being who you are. The emotional pain threshold, the different things that you're successful at, the different things that you and I are unsuccessful at, and how we deal with failure, how we deal with success. And I think a lot of this is revealed in the story of the Black experience in America and abroad. The whole diaspora, in terms of dealing with very tough situations and coming through it in for the most part, in a most remarkable way. And I think that's the essence of the story of the Black experience, if you will, if one looks at it through that lens. The gateways, I'm a big fan of gateways. When I talk with a young man who has pants hanging down and a hat turned around or whatever, people can come and say, hey, pull your pants up, turn your hat around, you might be successful. And I don't like that. I don't like approaching anybody like that. My first thing is, what is the gateway for that particular individual? And if the gateway is maybe entrepreneurship, then we might talk about how would you think you might want to dress when you go for an interview, for a job interview? What kind of approach would you take? And then to get them to think it through, and rather than me putting my philosophy, my ideas on them, to get them to think it through and come up with their own approach. and they might go the way they are one or two times and realize maybe I'll try this. I'll try changing this up or that, changing that up, and it, to kind of approach it that way. So my whole approach is gateways, and I believe that history is an enormous gateway because it is what it is. And even though panic may resent it and people may try to distort it, there it is. Truth is truth, and that's what has driven me and compelled me in this whole pursuit of trying to understand everything through the historical lens. And so I want to share a little bit about the contributions to my journey in Black history and understanding it, and also to talk about the grass and concrete concept I want to share with you as time permits. So here's a gentleman by the name of Ivan Van Sertima. I had never met him before. I heard about him. I'd watched some videos on those old things called video cassette recorders, big video VHS, and I'd heard some cassettes of him, and I was just blown away by his expansive knowledge and the depth of his knowledge. And he had written over 30 volumes of literature, and which I'm going to share one with you a little bit in just a few moments here. He says, but here's a quote. He says, "We have come to reclaim the house of history. We are dedicated to the revision of the role of African in the world's greatest civilizations, the contributions of Africa to the achievements of man in the arts and sciences. We shall emphasize what Africa has given to the world, not what it has lost." And I really love that. Now, what happened? He passed away in 2009. Someone gave me his phone number. I asked for it. I called him up. Once again, pre-digital, no cell phones. So I called him up at home. His wife, Jacqueline, answered the phone. And she said, I said, is Ivan there? And she says, yes, she is. And who is this? He came to the phone, and within 45 minutes, we became as good of friends as you can become within 45 minutes. And I told him, I said, you don't know me. I barely know you, but I would hope that you would want to get to know me. And I know I definitely want to get to know you. And then at the end of 45 minutes or so, he asked me for my address. 3 weeks later, a big box of books arrived. And in the books, in the box, there's Before Columbus They Came, and his book about Moors and Asia and Africa, Egypt Revisited, all these different books. Well, I started reading one of the books, and it's called Egypt Revisited. You see on your screen. And so as I was reading it, and when I read a book, really read a book, I write back to the author, and I use a red or green pen or something like that, and I just say, or blue, and I say, I don't agree with this, or what do you mean by that, or great point, or 2-3 chapters later, oh, that's why you wrote that, and so that's the way I was started reading this book. I called him back up and I said, Ivan, would you become my main cultural guide? And will you allow me to ask the most craziest questions that are ricocheting around in my head? And he was very kind. He says, absolutely. We spent hours and hours and hours on the phone talking about different things, and things I didn't understand, the things I disagreed with, the things I was seeking to understand. And so this book, Egypt Revisited, that was like driving down the Autobahn of life at 90 miles per hour and then wrapping my brain around a telephone pole. It was that book filled with pictures. I don't even know if it's still in print. I hope it is, but that book really challenged me on many, many levels. And then Richard Poe, who's a white guy, a journalist, an award-winning journalist, I might add, he wrote a book called Black Spark, White Fire. And this particular book, it grabbed my attention because he writes it like a novel, or he talks about Hannibal and all these different individuals. And his main thing is, were the Egyptians black? And he's basically said, I have no dog in the hunt. There's nothing here for me to gain or lose. I just want to approach this as an investigative journalist and try to figure this out. And so he goes back and forth, and I'm not going to tell you what he comes up with, but I'll tell you, that book really, I'll say this, he does believe the ancient Egyptians were black. And so those two books especially grabbed my attention. And then it was the study of Egypt Egyptology, ancient Egyptian understanding. And here you have the Sphinx of Giza, and you have this view of the Sphinx of Giza. I actually have a mold I developed of the Rosetta Stone, which was used to crack the code to hieroglyphics, and was probably is the key that unlocked the understanding of ancient Egypt. And one of my replicas was used in the movie Night at the Museum Part 3. This is all part of my journey in terms of trying to figure all this out. And here's what Vivant Denon, who was part of the Napoleonic Egyptian military campaign and drew this picture. This is what he said about what he saw. He says, though its proportions are colossal. Remember, this was written in 1798, 1799, approximately. And he said, so colossal, you have the two F's or the S's in that kind of old English. But he says, though its proportions are colossal, the outline is pure and graceful. The expression of the head is mild, gracious, and tranquil. The character is African, but the mouth and the lips, which are thick, has a softness and delicacy of execution truly admirable. It seems real life and flesh. Art must have been at a high pitch when this monument was executed. This was prior to, I don't know, there's all kinds of theories about the low noses and nose and lips being shot off by the cannons of Napoleon. I don't know too much about that. I've got some theories, but we're not here to listen to my theories about that. But I just wanted you to see what he saw in what he wrote about the Sphinx of Giza back in 1798 or so. And another thing that really impacted me as a chaplain for the NBA, the Wizards, this was written during the 25th dynasty, right around 714 BC, 725th dynasty of Egypt, ancient Egypt. And here's what the seer, the prophet Isaiah said. He said he's talking about a land beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, which is Kushite Sudanese Africa. Go to a nation tall, and that word tall literally means extended, stretched out, and smooth of skin, polished, furbished, to a people terrible, which means great, awesome, respected, to be feared from their beginning onward. And folks, that last phrase there, from their beginning onward, is what really grabbed me. So, that's why I go back to being a great fan of gateways, because it was not the social issues that grabbed me initially. It wasn't the justice issues that grabbed me initially. Because remember, I grew up in Alberta, Canada, with no TV, and barely read the paper. I was out of touch completely with what was going on in America in my childhood, in the early 60s, in the 60s and 70s. I was there in Canada. So it was a situation where this right here, from their beginning onward, I thought, wow, there must be some extra biblical information that will corroborate this, which I found tons of it. And then in Nahum 3, Nahum wrote around the same time, 713 BC, once again, the 25th dynasty under the reign of Pianki and Shabaka and Tarharka. And he said Ethiopia and Egypt's strength was infinite, boundless, without limit. So here we have a geographically specific group of people, an ethnically specific group of people talked about we're talking about 2,700 years ago or so, prior to our time here. And so that's what really grabbed me. And then all the social and the justice issues came as the caboose on the train later on, as I got more into this particular topic. So this is all part of my journey, and I hope I know your journey may be different, and your story will be different, but I'm just sharing. These were the elements that really helped to awaken my mind and my heart in this particular topic. And then it was co-writing a Black History curriculum that I talked to Terrian about, and I'll just share this real quickly. We've developed a 1,248 page textbook filled with over 2,500 images, and this really grabbed me. Co-writing this textbook took 2.5 years, 12 16-hour days putting this together. And so that right there, and then the music, which is Tarian. I don't know if I mentioned this to you about, we have 41 songs, like an anthology of Black history. This also has grabbed me, and then co-writing this book, Return to Glory, really helped me to understand some things. And then we turned that into a film. So the whole idea of understanding the past and then understanding the mental, emotional roadmap to wholeness. All of this, I began to interview people for this book. And so most of my interviews were of African American men over the age of 35. And what happened is that I began to realize that it was kind of stilted. It's like, you want to talk to me about what? I remember one gentleman, he just said, if you want to hide something, just put in a book if you want to hide it from young Black men. And that was his take on it. And he says, you're kind of wasting your time. But we forged ahead and continued. And one of the things that happened is that I asked a question that changed the tone of every single interview that took us from 45 minutes many times to 6 to 8 hours, and dear friendships emerging, sometimes crying together, and just becoming a bond developing as a result. And the question that I asked is a question that really helped me understand this roadmap to wholeness, the grieving process. And here's the question: do you remember the moment when you realized that because of the color of your skin, that the rules are somehow different for you? Now, basically, for those of you who know about question asking, this is not a very good question to ask because it's expecting a negative or positive response. Do you remember the moment? Well, no, I don't. Oh, yes, I do. But I'll tell you, no, not one person has ever responded with a yes or no response. Everyone has paused. I can remember one 65-year-old man who worked for the government civil service, and elegantly dressed, and just he just was sitting there, and I was just asking. I asked this question, and I remember him pausing and looking out the window, and then looking back at me, and then telling me with brilliant clarity what happened when he was about 6 years of age. He knew what time of day it was. He remembered the color of the car, the look on the face of the man who rolled down the window and said something to him as a young kid. He remembered what he was wearing at that time. He remembered when he ran back to his house, which is not far away, and how he what he said to his mother, and the expression on her face and how she responded. And then his father a little bit later in the day when he heard about what happened. And so from that moment, what I began to see when I asked this question of a number of individuals is the grieving process. And here's what Count T. Cullen from the Harlem Renaissance said. He wrote this poem that he originally called The Incident, but for the purposes of our time together here, we'll call it The Moment. And he said this. He says, once riding in old Baltimore, heart filled, head filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean, kept looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger. So I smiled, but he poked out his tongue, and he called me nigger. On that, I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. This encapsulates, he has encapsulated in poetry, poetic form, this moment that we're talking about here. And so the whole grieving process, I want to share with you a story. I was down at LANL, Los Alamos National Laboratory. Oh my goodness, probably about 14, 15 years ago. And I was doing their Martin Luther King event. They invited me down to speak. And this gentleman came to me afterwards, and I talked about the moment and all of the, mentioned Count T. Cullen's poem and the different things that the stories I had heard. Well, when I got outside, it was kind of chilly, and I was, it's January in Los Alamos National Laboratories, up in kind of a hilly area in New Mexico, and the wind was howling, and I wanted to get in the car and get back to the airport in Albuquerque and get back home to BWI Airport. And he came to me and he started sharing with me his moment, and then he started saying, he says, you know what happened to me? He said, from that moment on, he said, it's like everything changed. And he says, it was like I was leaning into wind, a hurricane force wind, which I call hurricane bigotry, because wind gets a name after a sustained speed of about 74 point something miles per hour, 75 miles per hour for our purposes. And it gets a name like Hurricane Alex and Hurricane, you know the names of hurricanes. And but he said, I began to lean into this wind. And he said, just like you see in the image of this reporter, I don't know where he is, could be in the panhandle of Florida or in Houston, Texas, or someplace dealing with the hurricane force wind. He's leaning into it. He said that as a man, a black man, he says, I learned how to retain my equilibrium while leaning into the wind. So when people would say things, or there'd be pejorative attitudes, or silence, or I knew it was happening, but I learned to lean into it. He says, and also I developed a kind of dark sense of humor about it. And he said that he says, I learned how to navigate through life leaning into this wind. He says, I got an assignment in Japan. And he said, the moment I got off the airplane, it's like the wind stopped. The wind stopped. And he says, I hardly even knew how to stand up mentally, emotionally, spiritually, let alone physically. He says, it was just astonishing to me to be in this place. Now, as a sidebar here, if you're a Korean in Japan, you're dealing with about 150 miles per hour. And, in another aspect, if you're a gypsy in any part of Europe or Scandinavia, you're leaning into about 100, 140, 150 miles per hour. The Hutus and the Tutsis of Rwanda. We have a lot of genocide that happened. And if you're a dark skin color in Mexico, the darker the skin, the more the wind. And so, but he said here in Japan, as a black man, he said that I didn't feel the wind. He says about 3 weeks later, I was. He says a delegation came from D.C. And he said, we got into this restaurant, we sat around, and he said, wouldn't you know it? The wind started picking up. I felt the wind again. Now, the point is, about the wind, is that he was saying that it was just something that culture, things were coming at him with this wind, and that he was able to handle it and deal with it in a specific sort of way. And then he said something to me that I will never, never forget. And it grabs me every time. He looked at me, and he's no BS kind of guy. And he looked at me straight in the eye, and he said, for some reason, I don't feel any wind coming from you. Now, what happened to me is I was driving back. I didn't know how to handle it. I just kind of like, oh, thank you, sir. Yeah, I didn't know quite how to respond. It was one of the finest compliments I've ever received. But as I was driving back to Albuquerque, there were a couple of times I had to pull over because it was just overwhelming. And I began to think, with my kids, my spouse, my neighbors, people where I interact with, I never want to be a sponsor of wind. And when I am, not if I am, but when I am the sponsor of this wind that we're talking about here, this metaphor, I want to be man enough to go to that person. If I'm a sponsor of wind for 3 people, I want to go back to those 3 people. If it's 300 people, I want to go back to those 300 people. If there's one person, I want to go back to that one person and apologize and deal with it, because I never want to be a part of that which is blowing wind on someone else that makes them to have to lean into it. So I want to share. I'm sharing this story because when we talk about the grieving process, as I was understanding when I asked the question, do you remember the moment when you realized that because of the color of your skin, the rules are somehow different for you? The grieving process is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She passed away a few years ago, and she's the one that codified this. And it's not a neat, well, I'm done, after the moment, I'm in denial. Now I'm done with that, and I'm going to get angry, and I'm done with that. I'm going to bargain. No, this is something that we go back and forth and all around. And this is, and grieving has to do with loss, the loss of a limb, the loss of a job, the loss of a dream, just the loss of some part of us that isn't functioning properly, all of the hearing going bad or something like that. that is grieving, has to do with loss. And I believe that the loss that we're talking about today is the loss of innocence. It's like a 5, 6, 7, 12-year old kid suddenly realizing, are you kidding me? Just because of the color of my skin? I are you kidding me? And then the awakening to that information, that reality, the denial. Well, maybe if this can't be happening, and then the anger of like just getting pissed off, just saying, I can't believe this is happening. And sometimes suicidal thinking, sometimes aberrant behavior, sometimes all kinds of situations, uh, trying to deal with this reality. And then the bargaining. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe when I get my MBA, maybe when I get my PhD, maybe when I get this type of car, a Mercedes or a Bentley or Lamborghini or whatever it might be, Lexus. Maybe when I get that corner office with the great view, maybe when I get that house on the hill, maybe things will be different. And then suddenly, what we could call destination sickness, arriving at the destination and realizing that things are worse than previously understood. It just the bargaining, then the pit of despair, and that's where the suicidal thinking, the harm to oneself, those types of things that emerge. And acceptance, the acceptance is something that we all perhaps have lost someone. And my parents, for instance, they passed away. Three other siblings, they passed away in 2009 within 33 days of each other. It's like we became orphans in 33 days. Dad was 91, mom was 90. And I can remember, even though there was a lot of anticipatory grief because we knew because of their age and because of some of the health issues that this was inevitable, it's going to happen, and it's probably going to happen sooner than later. And in spite of all the anticipatory grief, I can remember I went through this period for 4 to 5 months where I was in kind of a blue funk, and then I can hardly even explain it to you, but all of a sudden one day, it was an evening, it just like the cloud lifted, and there was a sense of acceptance of it all. And that is when it has to do with loss. When someone has lost a limb or something like that, there's this grieving process, and then ultimately it's like, okay, I got to regroup. I got to become solutional. I've got to figure this out. This is my lot in life, unless I get another limb attached in some way, and there's biometrics that can help me to move my hand or something, some other aids that can help me. This is the way it is. And then there's acceptance, which is different from resignation. Resignation is like, oh, okay, what the heck? Okay, this is the way it is. But acceptance is more of a proactive, a forward moving type of an attitude. But when we're talking about the wind, or we're talking about the grieving processes in this regard, it is different, because one can be in acceptance from what I've heard, at like 10:30 in the morning, and be back to square one with something happening at 4:30 in the afternoon. And so it is a constant up and down and all around type of situation. This, once again, as I said early on, I can barely explain a thimbleful of what we're talking about here. But I don't understand it. I don't. It's not my life experience, but I can report what I'm hearing from people who have opened up and shared their innermost thoughts, feelings, and a sense about what is happening in their lives. So I just wanted to mention that, and then we move on to the grass and concrete. And if, by the way, if you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat. And Terrian, if you can moderate that, our time is, I guess, another 15 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for some questions, or 10 minutes or so. But Terrian, if you would be the MC on that, and keep me pointed in the right direction when it comes to the questions and comments. But grass and concrete, here's a metaphor that I have used for years, and that has helped me to understand some things. And here you see a sidewalk, and of course, grass. You try to grow grass somewhere in a lawn, it's like, oh my goodness, I put straw on it. I got to water it every day, two or three, four times a day. And, it's barely growing. But you put concrete down, it's like grass is growing all through all kinds of places, concrete or asphalt. It's like, oh my goodness, how does this happen? Well, the thing about this is the concrete is a metaphor for so much. And we can see here the fugitive slave laws and the bigotry and slave trade, Jim Crow, and all these other types of things. Is that the historical description of the concrete is that we have things like the slave trade. And, there's no way to exaggerate when trying to describe the horrific nature of the slave trade, the trade itself. And we then have what is known as the peculiar institution of slavery. And of course, the slavery we had here in America, the chattel form of slavery, is different from a lot of other types of slavery, enslavement, if you will. But just like William Wilberforce, he from 1792 on, he every year he'd go as a member of Parliament, he would bring forth the abolition of the slave trade. And ultimately, in 1807, it was abolished in Great Britain, which was they had dominion. The land. There's no place under the sun was always rising on the British Empire, and so, but it wasn't until 1833 and 1844 that slavery, the enslavement part of it, the trade was done, but then the enslavement, it took that many years from 1807 to 1833, 1840, 1834 for that to happen. And by the way, the day after it happened is when Wilberforce died. And he just, just like my job, my assignment has been done. And then we have here in America in the mid 1800s, the fugitive slave laws. So people would leave enslavement, captivity, being kidnapped in the South, and they'd fight against the Stockholm syndrome. They would go into the unknown. I can't even imagine what kind of stuff that they dealt with, the fears and the concerns of the unknown, because this is what they knew. But they didn't know that, and they didn't know if they're going to get killed, run down by dogs. They didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't even know if they'd be received on the other side. They didn't know how far the other side was, and what they would encounter just physically, going through forests and briars and all the rest of it, trying to find food and forage and place to sleep. So when they got north, and then the fugitive slave laws made it such where they were being pounded from the South, that anyone could, the slave catchers could come up north, and if anyone in the North was found that they had aided someone who had escaped, a freedom seeker, then that person was fined. If anyone in law in the North was complicit, they were fined, and other things happened to them. And so they went north into Canada. And there's a great book. I have an original copy of that book here. It's called Refugees. I'll show it to you. This is called Refugees from 1856, written by Benjamin Drew. And he went north into Canada, and he actually interviewed a whole bunch of people, and he told the stories, 118 stories of people that were either that were in one of the colonies, one of the towns in, especially in Ontario. And you had Oro, you had the Pierpont settlement, you had Queens Bush, so many different settlements that occurred. And even Harriet Tubman was interviewed in this book, 1856. So it was before she was known as the general, as Moses. And so this is a fascinating glimpse into what happened to them through because of the fugitive slave laws in Canada. And then we have the Dred Scott decision. Now, what happens here when we start talking about the concrete is that at the federal level, imagine the federal level, the Dred Scott decision, and I have actually right over here. I have in my collection. I don't know if I mentioned to you that I have a collection over 3,000 items. Oldest piece dates back to 1553. In my collection, I've done exhibits at the UN. We had over 1 million people, the White House, Clinton Presidential Library, and I have over here a newspaper with Dred Scott, and his wife and his two daughters. And sometimes I just look into the eyes of Dred Scott, but especially his wife and his daughters, and to think of what they endured at this time. And he was not a learned man, but he had street smarts. There was a wisdom about him in the way that he handled every situation. And so this fugitive slave law, the Dred Scott decision, basically said that at the Supreme Court level, which at the time was in St. Louis, Missouri, uh, uh, Justice Taney basically said, and the Supreme Court justices said that the black man has no rights that any white person has to respect. And so imagine that pressure coming down. Think of concrete now. Think of the metaphor concrete. That pressure coming down at the federal level impacting state laws, and then the state laws impacting communities, the communities impacting the various elements of the community, the religious, the legal, the business, all the different elements of a community, and then impacting the family. So boom, 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 boom. Here I have all these layers of pressure coming down, impacting the family, and then the individuals in the family. So if one individual in the family wanted to come up through this pressure, this concrete, what is the first thing that happens? Is the family says, you can't do that. That's impossible. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get us all killed? You can't go to school. You can't become educated. You can't get a business. You can't own that cow. You can't. All of the pressure just from the family because of all the pressure on top of that person. And so the person who came up through this whole system and became a Frederick Douglass, I mean, a Sojourner Truth and a Harriet Tubman. Um, it is just astonishing to think about what they came up against to accomplish what they did. And then, of course, the Civil War that was fought, and Reconstruction, Jim Crow. After Reconstruction, it was unleashed, especially in 1877, after the Hayes and Tilden run for presidency, and then Tilden won the popular vote, and Hayes won the electoral vote, and they got in the back room months later and figured it out, where the Democrats said, Tilden said, if you just release all the soldiers, bring the soldiers back from Richmond and different parts of the South that are enforcing the 13th, the 14th, the 15th Amendments, which had to do with ability to vote and citizenship and emancipation, the freedom of individuals. He said, if you'll just release bring the soldiers back, then we'll let you be president. And that story is so terrible because the Republicans said, okay, we'll take it. And once all the soldiers were back, all hell broke loose in the South. And that's when, if you follow the whole lynching, the numbers of reported lynching, boom, it just goes off the chart after that. And then you had the black codes that were enforced. You had, if someone didn't have a job, then they go to prison. And the only thing that they could do, even pre-Reconstruction, is that they could only work menial tasks. And if they wanted to do artisan type crafts, they would have to pay a tax of about $100 a year. Can you imagine $100 a year back in the late 1860s and early 1870s? It was like a fortune. You'd work most of the year just to pay that tax. And so, and if you weren't working, loitering or appearing to be loitering, boom, you're in jail. And then the whole chain gang, all that kind of stuff that began to emerge. And so you have all of this, the red shirts, and especially in North Carolina. Then we move up into the time of the Depression, where blacks were hired last and fired first. And then the struggle for civil rights. You have all the different legal aspects of Plessy versus v. Ferguson, Brown v. Board of Education, Sweat v. Painter, all these legal things that once again go back to up the Supreme Court level that are weighing down on prior to, especially Plessy v. Ferguson, about riding in a rail car and all these different things. So all of this is the concrete. And so what happens is when we look at this on a personal level, what tends to hold a person back? Not only we're talking now about the external concrete. I mean, all of us have internal concrete. We talk about if we were to stop right now and everyone else talk about the imperfections of our parents and the childhood experiences and the past pain, the lack of education, or the economic factors or language skills, too young, too old, not enough or too much experience, ethnicity, too tall, too short, the region of a country. You can tell where someone is from just by the way they talk. Oh, you're from New England. Oh, you're from the South. Oh, you're from Oregon, or you're from Michigan, or you're from Atlanta. All of the different things, the way, the regions of the country, the weight, the gender, religious background, criminal record, social skills, shine. All of this is part of the internal concrete. So adding the external with the internal is already there as part of our human condition. But by adding the external, it's amazing that anyone accomplished. And I just want to say to each one, everyone of African descent, that you come from some incredible stock, some people who have come up against uh, the most horrific situations. And here you are, as a testament to that. You're standing on their shoulders. It is an amazing life story of every one of us when we look at it through this lens. And then to have all of this as arrows or coming down on an individual. So the blades of grass. Do we have? I just want to say this one thing, and then we'll open it up. Terry, is that okay to do that? Maybe
Yeah,
another.
take your time. I mean, we don't want to rush you. If you want to go over, that's completely fine.
I'll be done in just a few moments. I'll just talk about one person. There's a number of stories we could tell, and I know Johnny's a dear friend of mine, Johnny Campbell, and he talked about some things in a similar way about Annie Malone and other people. But I want to say that here we have Harriet Tubman, who, if she had a business card, she would write words like, "I'm an abolitionist, a humanitarian, a cook, a logger, a nurse, a scout, a Union spy during the Civil War, the Moses of the Underground Railroad." And so here's the site you can see in Dorchester, Maryland. I live in Annapolis area, and I've been down here. My wife and I, we sometimes just get in a car, in one of our cars, and we just drive, down that way and just kind of go to where Frederick Douglass was. There's a little road sign, and I often thought, if this was George Washington, there would be more than a road sign here, about a place that he lived. But Harriet Tubman, there's a whole place. If any of you can ever get near Maryland, take your time to go down to the Eastern Shore and spend some time where Harriet lived. But this is a roadway, the possible site where she was born in Dorchester County, Maryland, that you see in that photograph. And here we have something. Minty was her name. Her real name was Araminta. Araminta, Araminta, and they called her Minty for short. So here this is something that's about Minty. She's age 27, chestnut color, fine looking, about 5 feet high. look at how they describe her. She's a $100 reward to be given to each of the above individuals. And so, just see the way they describe her: chestnut color, fine looking, about 5 feet high. So she was barely breaking 5 feet, probably 4 foot 11 and 2/3. And this was in 1849 in the Delaware Gazette. And what happened when she was about 15 years of age, which hardly anyone talks about or knows about, is that she was down at the general store, and suddenly this young man burst in from another plantation, and he was being chased by his overseer, and probably was another person of African descent who was running after him. And so when they both were running around in the store, he's trying to catch this guy, and then Minty, she was standing, I guess, near the cash register or something, or wherever she was. She was near the young man, and the overseer said, grab him right now, hold on to him." And she refused. She says, I'm not doing that. And so he grabbed a paperweight, which was probably weighed about a half a pound, or maybe a pound. I don't know what it weighed, but it was a hefty thing that held, sheafs of paper like receipts or something like that. We put on there to keep the wind from blowing them away, and they're kept in order in terms of time and date. And so he grabbed that paperweight and he threw it at the young man, but he missed the young man and he hit Harriet in her temporal lobe, and she had temporal lobe epilepsy for the rest of her life, which meant that she would be. And by the way, that's why she wore probably the reason why she wore a do rag. You know, you constantly you see her with the handkerchief around her head is because she probably didn't get very good medical attention, if any, and but she had in this epilepsy. What they said is that she would be mid sentence and fall asleep for 7 or 8 minutes, and then wake up and then complete her sentence and move on with the paragraph. And you can imagine, I mean, here's a young woman who escapes, and then according to recorded accounts, at least 300 more people she brought north through the underground railway. And she was up in Canada. She was in New York. I mean, she was all over the place. It was an amazing woman. And yet, you know, when you think about it, you know, maybe when she's think, well, I've got temporal lobe epilepsy, if she even knew what it was called. But anyway, I fall asleep, and she would have these ecstatic visions and things like that would happen and occur sometimes when she's sleeping and while she was awake. But what she would have every reason to not want to take people to go down and risk her own life, because what if they're being chased and they're hiding in the bushes and suddenly she has a lapse and she falls asleep for 5, 6, 7 minutes, and in that time now she's in great danger and she's not doesn't have her wits about her. That is reason number one, probably the best reason for her to say I never should do this, because then now she could rationalize I'm putting other people in harm's way if I fall asleep, so somebody else can do it. But she pressed through that, and you know, my estimation of her just through the roof when I understood what she was dealing with physically. And then she was asked by Union Army to organize, I spelled organize wrong, but just overlook that, please, a network of scouts and spies. And she led troops under the command of Colonel Montgomery and disrupted bridges, supply lines, and freed more than 750 more slaves. Now, that wasn't her personally going in. It was the whole movement, but freeing 750 other slaves, enslaved folks. And here she is, a little bit older. I own the painting on either side, the same painting. And some people say it could be Harriet Tubman. I don't know, but it's an original painting that is pretty fascinating of a woman sucking on a corncob pipe. I love the image. I'll tell you what, that's a dominion. Take a look at her. You know, if you put your fingers up to the screen, your screen, and just take her head and then put it down here, and then just think about your own head and how diminutive she was, you know, to bring it down to her waist. She was this was a tiny woman that you can see here. But anyway, that's beside the point. Less than 5 feet tall. Here she is over on the far left. That's Harriet holding the pan, and these are some of the folks that she helped to bring north. And then here she is 2 years before she died in 1911. Just a remarkable person. I would, you know, there's some people you just wish you could meet and speak with. That's Harriet Tubman. So anyway, I want to close here, and any questions, comments, maybe we could open up the mics. I don't know how many people we've got here, but if people want to ask questions, I'm wide open. Or have any comments?
Hi, Jill. My name's Laura. My video is not working right now, but I just wanted to say it was so cool that you went with Wes Unsold. I actually work at the University of Louisville, so he's a big name there. So go
Yes,
Cards!
it is.
And that's really cool. Yeah. So he was great, always great. Thank you so
You know
much.
what, Laura, you pronounce Louisville correctly. You're supposed to pronounce it as if you have a mouthful of marbles, and you did it
Exactly.
exactly.
I grew up in this area. I actually live in southern Indiana, but we're basically Louisville North,
Uh-huh.
and so it's really hard. I was watching was it Call Me Cat, the new one with Amy Farrah Fowler. That's not a real name, but the first episode, I was really getting upset because they were not saying it correctly, but they have
Louisville.
much better with the
Louisville.
pronunciation. Thank
Oh,
you so much.
yeah, Wes was, I could tell you a few Wes Unseld stories. I mean, as I said, I knew him when he was, worked with him when he was a player, and then as general manager and as coach, and back to general manager, and then as a private citizen. Um, he, um, he is every bit the gentleman that of every story you've heard about him behind the scenes, he is that and some. Yeah, just a man of integrity. And the word integrity is stalwart, just something that stands. And he didn't have a whole lot of natural talent in the sense of, in terms of being able to dribble the ball and do all kinds of fancy stuff. But he persevered and used his physicality, his skills, and his domination at the board to then grab the ball, to rebound the ball, and then he had this one arm, boom, just like a rifle bullet, a shot to someone who was making a break for the basket on the other end. A member of his team, and then they do this fancy doubles thing, and then dunk the ball, and the crowd go wild. They would say something like, and Wes to Biggie or something, whoever it was, they would talk about Wes throwing the ball, and that was pretty iconic. Anyway, thank you so much, Laura.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your story of Shaq. To see those shoes, that was just a phenomenal right there. And like Shaq, his backstory, he flunked out of I think Grambling State, and to see how successful he is now is just wow. I'm so honored that you got a chance to meet him. You know.
I'm going to do something here. I don't know if it'll show, but I don't know if you can see down. No, I can't do it. But inside this shoe, this was when he was a rookie.
Hmm.
And if
For
I
the
was,
Orlando Magics, I believe, and
yes, yes,
with Anthony Penny Hardaway, and
yes,
yeah.
yes. And so what happened is this shoe here is one of the originals when he was a rookie with the Orlando Magic, because you can. This is the old style shoe, the Reebok, and what happened is when you pull the inner sole back, there is a piece of paper that's stuck to the bottom, and it calls it the Shack Attack shoe, and it has
Yep.
the number, the model number, everything written, or the shoe number is handwritten on this under the insole. So this is a very valuable shoe, not only as a rookie his rookie year, but also the fact nowadays they don't do that kind of stuff. It's all automated, but it's kind of cool.
Yes, it was very cool.
I have a whole bag I bought just for the shoe, and I take it with me when I speak. And I pull it out of the bag, and the whole crowd goes crazy. Oh my goodness!
It's Shaquille O'Neal, maybe a size 22. Who could have found who wears a size
That's
22?
right. But I use it as a segue, to talk about what is life like in your shoes.
Which is an awesome segue.
Thank you, Debbie.
Mhm.
All right.
Anyone else?
Any other questions? I don't see any in the comments or chats just yet. Feel free to take yourself off mute, ask some questions, or if you don't want to speak, I am monitoring the chat.
Gonna have a few more awkward minutes here and just look at each other.
Just a few, just two. And we do want to let you guys know that there is a contest to win a free book, one of Joel Freeman's books, the Black History 365 book. If you guys do create a video of yourselves dancing to the Black is Beautiful, which is the book's theme song, and you post on Instagram with hashtag Black History or BH365KTK, we will be announcing the winner of that book on the 28th when Joel Freeman joins us again with our other two speakers for our conference panel. And we would really love to see you guys join us there.
Yes. What I can do, let me see if I can pull this. I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but would you like to hear one of the songs?
Sure, we would definitely love to hear a couple.
Okay, let me see if I can do this. And if I cut you off, I'll come right back on. And please don't let me back in. But hold on a second here. Can you still see me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take this out here. And then I'm going to go to this. Ah, yeah, I think I got it. Okay, this is called Black is Beautiful. This is the anthem for the entire project. And let me know, uh, Terry, and if you can just tell me if you can hear this or not.
I cannot. You might
Hold on
have
a second.
to go to your
Turn it on right
screen
now.
share and make sure you turn on the volume.
Black History 360. Can you hear that?
Yes.
Black is beautiful. Yes, it is. Black is beautiful. Black is beautiful. Yes, it is. Black is beautiful. You can see that I'm clearly comfortable up in my own skin. This one's for the melanin. This one's for the melanin. Everyone who owns the elements of the melanin. Stand up, stand up. Put your fist in the air if you're feeling the anthem. Okay, yo. Now ain't nobody being biased, I'm just stating facts. When I think about greatness, it goes back to black. I think about all the pain our people went through. The history was wiped out. Our people built America, the monuments, the White House. Barely got the credit, man, the names was never mentioned. Invented electric railways, home security systems. Defeated in the summer as hot as it may be. You can thank a black man for inventing the AC. Traffic light, blood bank, gas mask, it gets greater, bro. You walking up a lot of stairs without that elevator, huh? Refrigerator stoves, your TV remote control created the guitar, the jam we got sold. Spark plug motor, we roll, I'm so proud of us. Screaming at the top of my lungs to make it obvious. No ranks, no education, but managed to still win. We don't know where we going if we don't know where we been. No excuse. Black is beautiful. Yes, it is. Black is beautiful. Black is beautiful. Yes, it is. Black is beautiful. You can see that I'm clearly comfortable up in my own skin. This one's for the melanin. This one's for the melanin. Everyone who owns the elements of the melanin. Stand up, stand up. Put your fist in the air if you're feeling the anthem.
All right. You don't know my story yet. What you know is the glory of avoiding your recorded text. I am not a slave, man. I am not a victim. I am more than I forgave, man. I represent a whole body beneath me. I'm a wave, man. I vibe when I walk, man. I'm animated. Like to use my hands when I talk, man. I'm loud to a soft, man. This passion when you make it this far, you are a boss, man. Point me to the kitchen. I'ma stalk it with a saucepan. The smell of hot combs. I am your knock when I am not home. Echo to a talking wall telling you how I spot on. The promise of apprenticeship, the hope of abolition. It's the fashion they imagine. I am dripping in best wishes. The tears in the eyes of a lynch man that ran under the land, sprouted roots, and here I am. You live different, knowing limits live beyond the skies, and that's why I am Black History 365. Tell them. Black is beautiful. Yes, it is. Black is beautiful. Black is beautiful. Yes, it is. Black is beautiful. You can see that I'm clearly comfortable up in my own skin. This one's for the melanin. This one's for the melanin. Everyone who owns the elements of the melanin. Stand up, stand up. Put your fist in the air if you're feeling the anthem. If you're black and you love it, if you're black and you love it, just say, you're a king, you're a queen, very special indeed. If you're black and you love it, if you're black and you love it, just say, you're a king, you're a queen, very special indeed. You're a king, queen, very special indeed. Yeah, a king, yeah, a queen, very special indeed. Yeah, a king, yeah, a queen, very special indeed. Very special indeed. Very special indeed. Yeah, a king, yeah, a queen, very special indeed. Yeah, a king, yeah, a queen, very special indeed. Yeah, a king, yeah, a queen, very special indeed. Very special indeed. Very special indeed. Indeed.
Looks like we have one question. They want to know, is the song and album on Spotify, or where can they find it?
Yes, yeah, it's a, let me get back here on, yeah, it's on Spotify and it's on iTunes. In 24 hours, it hit in the top 10 of iTunes, Amazon, and I can't remember. There's one other too that it's on Deezer, Tidal, um, Amazon, Apple Music, and iTunes. Yes, and it's called Black History 365. It's Khao is the artist, and his music group, and then it is 41 songs, so it's 2 volumes. So you want to get volume 1. So it's like going through the entire textbook here. It's the first 20 songs or so bring you up to the 5th unit, and then all the rest of the units. And so it's like taking chapter by chapter. The lyrics are inspired by each chapter, so it's like a compilation of each chapter. And folks who have heard it, what you just heard is the anthem. Folks who've heard these songs have said that it's like could be Hamilton, the next Hamilton in Broadway.
Perfect. I think that was the only question that I'm seeing in the chat. Last couple seconds to get your questions in. If you don't get a chance to ask today, he will be joining us again for our speakers conference panel on the 28th at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So that is 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time.
1 o'clock Eastern time, right?
Yes. Those time zones are a little bit tricky. A little bit tricky.
That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. And thank you, Joel, for joining us and giving your wonderful presentation. And we can't wait to have you back.
Thank you so much, Terry, and really appreciate your kindness in allowing me to be a part of this. This means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the website, by the way, is bh365.org. So it's Black History. It stands for bh365.org. And you can kind of tool around there, see our team and what we're doing with the curriculum. And if anyone DMs me on Instagram, I'll send you the first unit, the PDF, the first unit. So just find Joel A. Freeman and then DM me and just say, I'd like to have the first unit, and I'll send it to you.
And don't forget to enter in our contest for your chance to win your very own copy.
That's right.
Again, you just post a video of you dancing to the anthem Black is Beautiful on Instagram, and make sure to tag asu.ktk sisters and use the hashtag BH365KTK, and that winner will be announced on the 28th at our speakers conference panel.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I'd like to have copies of each one too, and we'll put them all around our social media too.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We do hope you join us for our upcoming events. It was so nice having you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, everyone.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Sarah.